everybody. Thank you to John and to Paul for taking us through the legal and the technical challenges. And as Stuart said, my job now is really to point you towards some of the solutions that we've developed at GeoSmart, which we hope will be useful to property professionals in dealing with this problem. I'll be talking for 20 minutes and probably got 10 slides really to do with the product and the methodology. And then my budding assistant, Mike, all being well, will demonstrate a couple of case studies. And if Google Earth works as it should do, we'll blind you with some science for a few minutes, wake you up again. So GeoSmart Information, we're a relatively new company. Hopefully you have heard of us now. Been going for about 2 years. And we formed really from the expertise at ESI, which was Mark's company sitting in the front. Have you seen he's been pioneering that for 20 years now, 20-year anniversary actually this year. And they're one of the leading companies in hydrogeology and that type of specialism across the UK. Notably, we developed the UK's first groundwater flood risk map, which is a UK first, and I believe probably a world first as well. And off the back of that, we've been developing SuDS reports, which we'll demonstrate in a moment. So a track record, we think we've got a good track record. We've got experience of developing reports at other companies, as Stuart kindly mentioned. I've had the privilege of working at Argyll for many years, and previous to that also Groundshore, and some of you probably still use some of the reports which they're creating now. My colleague Paul's got a wealth of experience in hydrogeology and a PhD. We've got various other people such as Mike sitting over here who's involved in actually writing and assessing the reports, and we've got other people who are very well known within the groundwater and hydrology circles, such as Dr. Hanan Karam and Steve Buss. So we've got some legal and technical challenges to deal with, and really it was my job and my colleagues to try and build some solutions which would help people address these. If you look at traditional consulting reports, they're often too slow, time consuming, and they can be quite expensive. So I think dealing with sustainable drainage in the way it needs to be looked at now, we needed some new solutions to help with that. We've used the consulting experience from ESI to help with the technical aspect of that, but we've also added to that the information technology experience which we've built up over the last 2 years to build reports which are much quicker, easier to understand and easier to use. So the reports are part computer generated, but everyone's looked at by a consultant so that you can be sure that you're getting the right answer. If, for example, there's an issue with a report, you've also got somebody at the end of the telephone which you can call up and ask them further questions. So data is really at the core of all the products we're building, and as you know, there's a sort of growing drive really in the UK and also worldwide to the use of open data, which we fully support. So a lot of the data we use is open data, but I think the most important thing to take away here is that the two key data sets which we use in our reports are data sets which we've developed ourselves. So that is the groundwater risk data set, GW5, which covers England, Wales and Scotland. And off the back of that, we developed the SuDS data, sustainable drainage infiltration potential, which, as John said, is a key part of assessing suitability for sustainable drainage. We also have several data partnerships, so we do work with people like the BGS. Landmark are a large customer of ours using our groundwater data, and hopefully moving forward some data on sustainable drainage. We work very closely with the Environment Agency and also people like the Ordnance Survey. So in terms of methodology, Paul's already covered that in his talk, but needless to say, when we're looking at sustainable drainage options and feasibility, we're following the best practice guidance, both in the building regulations and planning guidance. So it's a hierarchy that you have to follow. Paul's already mentioned that. So the first thing is looking at discharge to ground, then seeing if you can discharge to a neighbouring surface water feature, failing that, looking to sewers and so on and so forth. So I think in your pack you've all got an example of SuDS standard report. It has a section on the methodology, so I won't go into too much detail, but feel free to read that and just rest assured that we are following the legal and technical guidance as it should be followed. So what we're doing in that report is we've got a number of data sets which we're analysing. The first thing that we're doing is really looking at the hydrogeological characteristics of the site. We're looking at how easy it might be to discharge surface water to the ground. So that's predominantly using geology maps and the SuDS 50 data. So that will give you an indication of whether it's very easy to discharge, as it might be on chalk. Obviously, parts of London are on clay, so that could inhibit that particular mechanism. We're also looking at the ability to discharge to surrounding surface water features. So we've got various data sets from the Ordnance Survey, which will locate those options and calculate distance and direction. And we can also look at things which could inhibit the ability to discharge as well, such as whether the site is located within a source protection zone. That can be very problematic, in particular if it's a brownfield site and it might be polluted. Of course, if you start trying to dig the site up and then discharge to the ground, you could be creating a preferential pathway for contamination. So here is a quick example of our SuDS 50 data. This is our head office up in Shrewsbury, and the key thing to take away there is on this particular data set, green is good, red is not so good, amber's in the middle. Where you can see the green, that means there's a high infiltration potential. So to the north of that site would mean that would be the ideal position for a soakaway. As you move to the south of the site, associated with the Reed Brook, you've probably got some less permeable deposits there, which would make it more problematic. So what are our reports? Well, they are a tiered number of reports. They start with a screening report, which is £195 plus VAT. The aim here is really to assess the feasibility of SuDS and provide a traffic light as to green, amber, red. Some type of SuDS are always possible, but what we're trying to tell you really is how easy is it to install SuDS. Obviously, the easier the better in terms of your client's requirements, because it's probably likely to be cheaper. So there's always opportunities and threats, and I think what we're trying to do here is really screen these out at a very early stage in the process. Of course, if there is a problem, then what do you do then? There are other reports here which deal with the more technical considerations in terms of runoff calculations, and also you may also want some design option feasibility studies. So when we move to the SuDS Plus and the SuDS Pro, we have reports which give you more detail on those particular considerations. So as I was saying, the SuDS standard is really a traffic light screening report, and we're going to take you through a couple of case studies in a second. A green really is a site where there's a wide range of sustainable drainage options. You'll probably be able to infiltrate to ground. You may have options to discharge to a stream nearby. It may not be that difficult to discharge to the sewer as well if that was a requirement. Moving to red, where We're not saying it isn't possible to install some kind of sustainable drainage system, but it's going to be more difficult. You may not be able to discharge to the ground because it's impermeable. There may be a stream or a river, but that could be some distance away. And as Paul mentioned earlier on, all of these things are going to impact on cost for the site layout, how many houses you can put on there. So, you know, we think they're important considerations to look at very early on in the site redevelopment cycle. So I'm going to invite my budding colleague here, Mike, who's going to take you through 2 case studies. The first one, Virginia Water in Surrey.
Thank you very much, Chris. So as Chris said, we had a case study where we wanted to look at Virginia Water in Surrey. Client came to us with a minor development. They just wanted to redevelop a site where there was an existing property, but they wanted to know what SuDS they can implement on the site. The local authority, I don't know if you've ever heard of the critical drainage areas that the local authority put in their surface water management plans, and as a result of that, the local council wanted to see what SuDS were feasible for the site. So if I just zoom in, and hopefully it's zooming across to the right place, if I switch this on. Okay, so the red line boundary, as I say, this is really for the screening report, and it may be for somebody who wants to buy a site that's never been to the site, they're interested in an area, they've looked at the land and assessed the cost, and they want to see what constraints and opportunities there are. So we put together the client site and apply a buffer to try and drag in the constraints and opportunities, such as the flood risk, the proximity to a surface water feature or a sewer. The first thing we look at really, and I'm hoping this will load, is the detailed terrain mapping. So we use the LiDAR data from the Environment Agency, which is kind of plus or minus 150 mil in accuracy, so incredibly accurate these days, almost as accurate as a topographic survey. But as you can see in the middle, unfortunately the client site's disappeared, but there's a depression. I'm hoping that the area here will show that the site actually slopes towards the southeast. If you think about that in relation to the location of sewers, obviously the drainage hierarchy puts that way down the list. The sewer line is actually to the north of the site, and well, the site actually drains to the south. So why would you want to put it into that piping system? You'd then have a look at the proximity to surface water line and surface water features as well, just to see whether or not that's a viable option to discharge, or if it flags up any issues with surface water flood risk, things like that. We'll also look at the risk of flooding from rivers and sea. As you can see, this site is not at risk of flooding from rivers and sea, so it's not a constraint to the site. If you were at risk, then you'd find maybe if you're at risk in the southern part of the site, then you would struggle, as Chris said on that previous example, you might struggle to put SuDS, implement SuDS at the site. Have a look at the groundwater flood risk. Now, the white is negligible, the yellow is low, and the amber is moderate. So what this tells us is that you're really going to have an issue at this site. If you want to infiltrate to the ground, you're going to be able to infiltrate without hitting a high water table. You know, a high water table would basically just push the water back up and out and flood everyone in the area. But with this site, it's pretty positive so far. We then have a look at the new SuDS infiltration mapping that we've put together at GeoSmart. The green is high potential for infiltration into ground, amber is moderate, and red is a very low potential. So all in all, and going back to Chris's red, amber, and green rating, you might think actually it's going to be high up on the scale, and it really is. There's a really high potential for most SuDS. You could probably discharge into the sewer if you really needed to, but just the northern part of the site, although you might have the local council have a few issues with it. I'm going to zoom to the second case study, which is in Herefordshire. Yeah, is it working? Is it working? Yeah, good. Okay, so I bring in the client site. This is a greenfield site, and in reality, from this aerial view, you don't really get a decent feel of what the topography is in the area. Again, we'd load in the buffer lines and use those really to interrogate the data in the area, because you might have areas of groundwater risk of flooding from rivers and sea, etc. And you want to see how far away they are to then advise the client, you do have a high risk of groundwater within 50 metres or within 100 metres. So we'd load in the DTM5, and immediately you can see the red is high and the blue is low. That the site is actually fairly constrained actually by the fact that there's a 10-metre difference in the highest point on the site and the lowest point on the site. So it's incredibly steep. And so kind of already, just by looking at the DTM, kind of flags some issues with that. Again, I'll have a look at the sewer locations to start off with, just to see how close they are. As you'll note here, the sewer to the south of the site, again, it's similar to the first one. You're not really going to be able to discharge to that sewer anyway, because the site actually drains to the northwest. Have a look at your nearest surface water line. Now, without the interrogation of the buffer, you might not note that there is actually a surface water feature that you're able to discharge into. So it's roughly 75 metres away from the site. But what that does is it flags the fact that this surface water feature is here. There may be a drain also going underneath this major road. I actually know a bit more about the site than maybe I let on. But there is actually a drain coming from the site in the northwest that actually joins that. But it's a screening. It shows you that there's a possibility to discharge that surface water feature. It just gives a potential to discharge there. Again, we'll look at the constraint, see whether or not there's a groundwater flood risk. There isn't on this site. Sometimes you can have half of the site that's at negligible risk, and another one there might be a low or moderate due to the underlying geology, permeability, etc. And then have a look at the SuDS 50. Now this doesn't show very well because it's actually an amber rating, so there's actually only a moderate potential for infiltration here. So all in all, this site is not the easiest site. You're not going to be able to get a wide range of SuDS options into there unless you do further site investigation. So within the screening report, we might recommend that you undertake some more surveys, maybe take some boreholes, possibly do a geotechnical study, and then come back and revisit the potential. It might actually flag that there is a moderate potential, or there is actually a high potential. But all in all, our screening opinions will give you that rating, give you an easy way to assess and tell your client what the way to go is. Thank you very much.
That's great, thanks Mike. Well, hopefully that gave you a bit of an insight in what we're doing within our report. So what he did there is really just an interactive way to show you how we analyse the data and come out with the answers in the SuDSmart screening report. Well, I only had one more slide anyway, so I won't bother going right to the end of the presentation. There are more to follow, but just so not to waste time, it was really just to conclude, just to say that clearly, there is a problem to be addressed. There's legal and technical challenges that need to be solved. We spent considerable time at GeoSmart building these solutions where you can have a fast, low-cost way of screening sites out at an early stage, and where necessary, if you need more detailed work carried out for a client later on, there's options to do that as well. And I think what does the future hold? As John said, I think the law might tighten and it might broaden to do with commercial development so that more sites are included. So there'll be more of a need. And of course, as data and technology improves, we'll be continually developing our product ranges to meet the challenges which come forward. So thanks for listening, and I'll hand back to Stuart.